This story takes us to the Caribbean island of Martinique, a French territory in the Lesser Antilles. Here stands Mount Pelée, a stratovolcano that reaches 4,583 feet above sea level on the northern end of the island. On May 8, 1902, this mountain unleashed one of the deadliest volcanic eruptions in recorded history, completely destroying the bustling port city of Saint-Pierre and killing nearly 30,000 people in just minutes. The eruption introduced the world to a terrifying new type of volcanic phenomenon called a pyroclastic flow, forever changing how scientists understand these powerful forces of nature. Mount Pelée had been quietly watching over Martinique for thousands of years before that fateful day in 1902. The volcano had erupted before, with recorded activity in 1792 and 1851, but nothing compared to what was coming. The mountain got its name from the French word pelé, meaning bald or peeled, because its upper slopes were often bare of vegetation due to previous volcanic activity. For the people living in its shadow, Mount Pelée was simply part of the landscape, a sleeping giant that provided fertile soil for their sugar plantations and tropical gardens. In 1902, Saint-Pierre was known as the Paris of the Caribbean. This wasn't just local pride talking. The city really was something special. Picture cobblestone streets lined with elegant colonial buildings, their French architecture creating shade from the tropical sun. The harbor bustled with ships from around the world, bringing goods and taking away sugar, rum, and other island products. About 28,000 people called Saint-Pierre home. They lived in a city that had electric lights, telephone service, and even a trolley system. The Grand Theatre hosted operas and plays that would have impressed audiences in Paris itself. Ladies strolled through the botanical gardens wearing the latest French fashions, while gentlemen gathered in cafes to discuss business and politics over strong coffee and fine rum. The city sat in a perfect natural amphitheater, with Mount Pelée rising majestically behind it and the Caribbean Sea sparkling in front. From the harbor, you could see ships anchored in the bay, their masts creating a forest against the blue water. The Roxelane River flowed through the city, providing fresh water and power for the sugar mills. Most residents were descendants of enslaved Africans who had been brought to work the sugar plantations, along with French colonists and people of mixed heritage. Despite the colonial social structure, Saint-Pierre had developed its own unique culture, blending African, French, and Caribbean influences in everything from food to music to language. The trouble began in late 1901, though nobody realized it at the time. Mount Pelée started showing signs of restlessness. Small earthquakes rumbled through the area, but earthquakes weren't unusual in the Caribbean. Local newspapers mentioned them briefly, but most people just went about their daily lives. By February 1902, things started getting more noticeable. The earthquakes became stronger and more frequent. People in Saint-Pierre could feel their houses shake, and dishes would rattle on the shelves. Still, most folks figured this was just normal island life. After all, the volcano had been quiet for 50 years. In March, something new happened. The Étang sec, a lake that sat in an old crater on Mount Pelée's slopes, began to warm up. Steam started rising from the water, creating an eerie fog that drifted across the mountain. Local hunters and farmers who ventured up the slopes reported that the lake was getting hotter each day. Then came the smell. A strong odor of sulfur began drifting down from the mountain, like rotten eggs mixed with smoke. On some days, the smell was so strong that people in Saint-Pierre had to cover their noses when they went outside. The local doctor, Dr. Guérin, noted in his journal that more patients were complaining of breathing problems and headaches. IRDs started acting strange too. Flocks of them would suddenly take flight for no apparent reason, circling the mountain and then heading out to sea. Dogs barked more than usual, and horses seemed nervous, shying away from certain areas near the mountain. April brought more dramatic changes. Small explosions began coming from Mount Pelée's summit. These weren't the massive eruptions that would come later, just little puffs of steam and ash that created small clouds above the mountain. From Saint-Pierre, these looked almost pretty, like white cotton balls against the blue sky. The local newspaper, Les Colonies, reported these events but treated them as curiosities rather than warnings. One article described the steam clouds as magnificent spectacles that might even attract tourists to the island. Some people did start to worry, though. Plantation owners who lived closer to the mountain began noticing that their workers were reluctant to go into certain areas. Animals were definitely acting up. Snakes and other creatures that usually stayed hidden in the forest began appearing in unusual places, as if they were fleeing from something. By early May, the signs became impossible to ignore. The steam clouds grew larger and darker. Instead of white puffs, they turned gray and sometimes black. The smell of sulfur became constant, and the fine dust of ash began falling on the northern parts of the island. The temperature of the Atung Sek Lake reached the boiling point. Visitors reported seeing dead fish floating on the surface, and the steam rising from the water created a constant fog that made the mountain look like it was wearing a ghostly crown. On May 2, Mount Pelée gave its most serious warning yet. A loud explosion echoed across the island, loud enough that people in Saint-Pierre stopped what they were doing and looked toward the mountain. A column of ash shot up into the sky, creating a dark cloud that could be seen for miles. This time, the ash fall was heavy enough to dust the rooftops of Saint-Pierre. People had to sweep their porches and shake out their clothes. The harbor master noted in his log that several ships reported difficulty seeing the coast because of the ash cloud. Some residents started to panic. Families began loading their belongings onto carts and heading south, away from the mountain. But the local authorities tried to calm people down. The governor of Martinique, Louis Moutet, visited Saint-Pierre and publicly declared that there was no immediate danger. A scientific commission was quickly formed to study the situation. The professor they brought in, Gaston Land, climbed the mountain with some local guides. When he returned, he announced that while the volcano was active, it posed no immediate threat to Saint-Pierre. He pointed out that lava flows, if they came, would flow down the other side of the mountain, away from the city. What Professor Land didn't know was that Mount Pelée wasn't a typical volcano. It wouldn't produce the slow-moving lava flows that scientists understood. Instead, it was preparing to unleash something far more dangerous. May 8, 1902, started like many other days in Saint-Pierre. People got up early to beat the heat, opening their shutters to let in the morning breeze from the sea. The ash fall had stopped during the night, and some residents hoped that maybe the worst was over. Around 7:30 in the morning, Mount Pelée exploded with unimaginable force. But this wasn't a typical volcanic eruption shooting lava high into the sky. Instead, the mountain released something that scientists had never seen before, something that would later be called a pyroclastic flow. Picture a massive cloud of superheated gas, ash, and rock fragments rolling down the mountain like an avalanche, but moving at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. The temperature inside this cloud reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt copper instantly. The cloud raced down Mount Pelée's slopes in just 3 minutes, following the path of the Blanche River Valley straight toward Saint-Pierre. Nothing could stop it. Trees were ripped from the ground, buildings were flattened, and everything in its path was either incinerated or buried under tons of hot debris. The people of Saint-Pierre had no time to escape. Most probably never even realized what was happening. The pyroclastic flow moved so fast that it overtook people before they could take more than a few steps. The superheated air killed instantly, even before the debris reached them. In less than 3 minutes, Saint-Pierre was completely destroyed. The bustling city that had been called the Paris of the Caribbean was reduced to smoking ruins. Every single building was either flattened or severely damaged. The elegant theater, the Grand Cathedral, the government buildings, the homes and shops, all gone. Ships in the harbor weren't safe either. The pyroclastic flow continued out over the water, capsizing vessels and killing sailors who thought they were at a safe distance. Of the 18 ships in the harbor that morning, only one managed to escape, and even that one was badly damaged. The heat was so intense that it melted glass, twisted metal, and turned sand into a glassy substance. Bottles in shops fused together. Metal roof tiles curled up like paper in a fire. Even stone buildings cracked and crumbled from the extreme temperature. Perhaps most tragically, the speed of the disaster meant that families were killed together, with no time for goodbyes or final words. Children were found still in their beds. People were discovered at breakfast tables, their morning meals still on their plates. In this complete devastation, only a handful of people survived. The most famous was a prisoner named Auguste Saparis, who was locked in an underground cell beneath the town jail. His cell had thick stone walls and only a small window facing away from the mountain. When the pyroclastic flow hit, he was burned severely but survived because the walls protected him from the worst of the heat and debris. Another survivor was a cobbler named Léon Compère-Lander, who lived on the edge of town. He was badly burned and knocked unconscious, but he somehow lived through the disaster. When he woke up, he found himself surrounded by complete destruction. A few people who were on the very outskirts of the city also survived, though most were severely injured. They described the sound of the eruption as like 1,000 thunderclaps all at once, followed by an eerie silence that seemed to last forever. These survivors' accounts helped scientists understand what had happened. Their descriptions of the superheated wind and the wall of darkness that rolled down the mountain provided the first clues about pyroclastic flows, a volcanic phenomenon that wasn't well understood at the time. News of the disaster spread quickly around the world via telegraph. Newspapers in Paris, London, and New York ran headlines about the complete destruction of Saint-Pierre. The scale of the tragedy was hard to believe. An entire city, wiped out in just minutes. But there wasn't much rescuing to be done. The search for survivors continued for days, but very few were found alive. Instead, rescue workers faced the grim task of dealing with nearly 30,000 bodies buried under tons of volcanic debris. The French government sent investigators to try to understand what had happened. Scientists from around Europe came to study the destroyed city and the volcano that had caused such devastation. Their work led to major advances in understanding how volcanoes work and what dangers they can pose. Mount Pelée taught scientists about a type of eruption they had never encountered before. Unlike the Hawaiian volcanoes that pour out streams of lava, or the explosive eruptions like Vesuvius that shoot debris high into the air, Mount Pelée produced something different and far more dangerous. The pyroclastic flow that destroyed Saint-Pierre was essentially a ground-hugging cloud of superheated gas and particles. It moved like a liquid, flowing down valleys and around obstacles, but it was hot enough to kill instantly and fast enough that nothing could outrun it. Scientists learned that this type of eruption happens when gas-rich magma reaches the surface and explodes violently, creating a mixture that's heavier than air but moves with incredible speed. The term pyroclastic flow comes from the Greek words for fire and broken rock. This understanding revolutionized volcanic science. Suddenly, scientists realized that the greatest danger from some volcanoes wasn't lava or falling ash, but these fast-moving, superheated clouds. This knowledge has since saved countless lives by helping predict which volcanoes pose the greatest threats to nearby populations. After the disaster, there was debate about whether to rebuild Saint-Pierre at all. Some people thought the area should be abandoned, turned into a memorial to those who died. Others argued that the fertile soil and strategic location were too valuable to give up. Eventually, a smaller town was built on the ruins of the old city, but it never regained its former glory. The new Saint-Pierre had only about 5,000 residents, a fraction of the original population. The grand theatre and elegant mansions were never rebuilt. Today, visitors can still see ruins from the 1902 disaster scattered around the modern town. The walls of the old prison where Auguste Saparis survived still stand. Parts of the cathedral remain, along with other stone structures that were too solid to be completely destroyed. A museum now tells the story of the eruption and displays artifacts recovered from the ruins. Melted bottles, twisted metal, and other items show the incredible power of that pyroclastic flow. Photographs taken before and after the disaster illustrate the complete transformation of the landscape. Mount Pelée hasn't remained quiet since 1902. The volcano erupted again in 1929 to 1932, though this time authorities were better prepared. The population was evacuated, and while the eruption caused significant damage, there were far fewer casualties. Scientists now monitor Mount Pelée constantly. Seismometers detect even the smallest earthquakes. Gas sensors measure what's coming out of the mountain. Temperature monitors watch for changes in hot springs and fumaroles. If Mount Pelée shows signs of awakening again, people will have much more warning than they did in 1902. The mountain remains potentially dangerous. It's what scientists call an active volcano, meaning it could erupt again. The type of magma and gas content that created the 1902 disaster are still present beneath the surface. However, our understanding of volcanic warnings has improved dramatically. The subtle signs that people in 1902 dismissed as curiosities would now trigger immediate scientific investigation and likely evacuation procedures. The destruction of Saint-Pierre changed how the world thinks about volcanic hazards. Before 1902, most people thought the main danger from volcanoes was lava flows, which move slowly enough that people can usually get out of the way. The Saint-Pierre disaster showed that some volcanic eruptions can kill thousands of people in just minutes. This knowledge has influenced how communities near active volcanoes prepare for potential disasters. Cities near dangerous volcanoes now have evacuation plans, early warning systems, and public education programs to help residents understand the risks. The story of Saint-Pierre also demonstrates the importance of listening to natural warning signs, even when they seem minor. The earthquakes, strange animal behavior, and gas emissions that preceded the eruption were all trying to tell people that something was wrong. Today, scientists know to pay attention to these subtle signals. Mount Pelée stands as a reminder of nature's incredible power and our ongoing need to respect the forces that shape our planet. The mountain that once destroyed paradise continues to watch over Martinique, monitored now by modern science but still capable of the same devastating power that shocked the world over a century ago. The tragedy of Saint-Pierre teaches us that while we can't prevent natural disasters, we can learn from them, prepare for them, and use that knowledge to protect future generations from similar catastrophes. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to explore more geological wonders on our channel.